what I want to talk about is essentially how well-intentioned policies, the policies which Sir so cogently spoke about this morning, how they're translated into action, right down to street level, literally down to street level. Because what I want to talk about is this emerging network of EV filling stations. It's not easy to achieve this new market. So what lessons can we learn as we implement it at street level? Now, I want to start with a question for the audience. In many countries, there's something of a chicken and egg debate. Which comes first? Should it be the charging points first, or should it be the electric vehicles? So I'd like your opinions on this. Should we create a charging infrastructure first that is ahead of market demand, quite possibly with public subsidy, that is to reassure drivers that they're not going to get stranded with a flat battery in a bad place? Should we do that, or should we take the more free market approach? That is, should we hold back and let charge point providers respond to the demand as it emerges? So should we wait for the market to lead as and when it develops? So I'd like you to, an electronic show of hands, please. So how many people think A? Should the charging points come first ahead of demand? So how many people think that? If you do, vote A. Or B, should the electric vehicles come first? Interesting, the wisdom of hindsight. It may reflect. So show of hands now, probably. How many people are from the Netherlands here? Okay, yeah, that may reflect or explain some of that. Because, well, thank you very much. That's extremely interesting. Now, what we did in the UK, moving back, is we decided that the way forward would be to the coalition government, which from 2011, despite its predilection for the free market and austerity measures elsewhere, it decided the way ahead was to subsidise with more than 30 million euros match funding this network ahead of demand. The government said this was to enable drivers to roam with confidence beyond the usable range of their vehicle, and of course to accommodate people like me who don't have off-street parking and can't recharge at home. And the points must be, they said they don't expect one at every street corner, but they should be easy to locate and to access, they said. So they introduced the plugged-in places, and these are sticking. The plugged-in places were trial places. So these were led by public-private consortia, they were the ones that got the money through a competition, and 50% funding here was awarded. So we took with wisdom of hindsight, we might not have done that, but this is the approach we took. So the government said, well, to be fit for purpose, this new charging, new fueling stations for EVs, first of all, they should be available where and when people want them. They should be interoperable, just like filling stations. And they should be conveniently located, and they should be easy to use like filling stations. That was the vision. So let's look at these three things in a little bit more detail. Well, first of all, availability. A network of points should be provide comprehensive coverage. It should be located more or less what we expect the demand to be. There has indeed been some thoughtful planning and targeting of points ahead of demand, difficult though it is, especially in the northeast of England, as represented here, and also in Greater London, plugged-in places. So, for example, they used mosaic mapping technique, which was to look at the profile of different neighbourhoods and to anticipate where the sort of people who would acquire an electric car would be resident, where they would live. And it turned out to be quite an accurate prediction. This sort of crescent shape, gentrified sort of inner London, area, also coinciding where more than 70% of people didn't have off-street parking. And the local boroughs responded to this. So at this kind of fine grain area, there was some careful targeting. However, because of that approach, and also because the plugged-in places were leading this, there were some gaps. So our colleagues plotted this. This was in another work package 4, and they identified some pretty big gaps. We just took the centre line. This is an important corridor, A1 M1, not only for north-south communication in England, but also for communication across to and from mainland Europe and the North Sea region, so through the airports and ferry points. So some pretty big gaps of more than 60 kilometres where there was not a charge point at all, despite the fact they were quite close to some major population centres. Our House of Commons Transport Committee has taken a keen interest in all this, not least because of the amount of public money involved and whether it was achieving the intended outcomes. The evidence received by the committee, this is last year, 2012, did confirm that the spread was very uneven. There was big clustering. Admittedly, this was partly because the earlier plugged-in places, the North East and Greater London, they understandably had more, but that's where most of them were located, and some had none at all, even by 2012. And again, they did question the accuracy of the data that they received, but the National Charge Point Register, which the government itself had commissioned, showed that, for example, in Northern Ireland, there were just 6 electric cars registered, but they had a choice of 44 points. And conversely, Wales, just the whole of Wales, just 2 points and 14 vehicles. So the conclusions of the committee, amongst others, was they could discern no clear relationship between the demand for plugged-in cars and the supply of public charging infrastructure. This may raise questions about the assumption that providing infrastructure will stimulate the demand for plug-in cars, which of course was the whole point of it. So an interesting result. So that's availability. We now look at interoperability. From the user's point of view, the infrastructure should be sufficiently joined up to allow people to roam between the networks of different providers. So in general, most of the plugged-in places introduce a subscription-based scheme. And what that meant was that if you lived in Greater London, for example, you got a very good deal. You could plug into all their plugged-in places that you wanted for the subscription rate of just, less than €15 a year within the home network. But you couldn't roam into other areas, initially anyway. So we looked at other models, such as the ELAD in the Netherlands, which operated allowing roaming. But it turned out to take some time to crack. So exceptions to this general picture of lack of joined-upness was the northeast of England, where the charge your car plugged-in place have expanded, perhaps some would say aggressively, north and south. So it has a network of, I think, the website said about 1,000 points altogether, something like that. Another example is the east of England plugged-in place, which negotiated a memorandum of agreement between its neighbours, particularly Greater London. And the result of that is, since last autumn, it facilitates intercommunication between their respective back-office systems. And since this autumn, the effectiveness is that it means if you're a longer distance commuter, you can travel between the two areas. So perhaps a major breakthrough, but it's the exception, I think, rather than the rule as yet, as Serd was saying. So last but not least, convenience and ease of use. So in principle, the infrastructure should be sited and designed to fit around people's journey patterns and people's lifestyles, which we've been talking about. So people's journeys to work, study, escorting children, and so on. And the point of it is to reduce, if it's in a visible location, it should reduce the range anxiety of not only current drivers, but also potential drivers. And with some success, we have some examples of, as in other countries, of well-used charging points. This is in University Quarter near the British Museum. It's well used, and I think it's fair to say that most EV drivers are willing to open up conversations with people, with passers-by, and they're good ambassadors for it. So the converse are also true, however, that conspicuously underused or misused spaces undermine the credibility somewhat, and perhaps annoy people, not only the other drivers who can't park there, but also the local authorities who own the sites, and their councillors may ask questions. What about all the revenue we're losing because they're not being used? So there's that kind of issue if they're conspicuously not used or misused. This one is located just at the entrance of a town hall. I won't mention which one it is. It was used by an EV at the opening ceremony, but that was about 18 months ago. And my colleagues who work there say, well, we've never really seen it turn green, that's charging an EV. The reasons for that are not difficult to work out. Any ideas why that's not actually being used? Yeah, somebody else, it's not lined or signed. Most people don't really know what it is. So it's a popular site, other people use it. The same is true of this one. This is outside of a doctor's surgery, so it's a popular site. The driver, I had a chat with him, had no idea what that charge point was. He just parked there because there was nothing reserving. And likewise, outside of video, these are all popular, video rental, very popular places. And I suspect the reason is that there was an argument with, outside of, it sounds like a very small micro-level story, but outside of a fast food shop, the fast food owners objected to it, and it erupted into a big press story locally. So they've not been lined and signed. This one too is not really used. It's not just because it's not in, but this is near a railway station car park, but it's also quite a leafy area, quite shady. Any ideas why some people might be deterred from using that one? What might put you off about that, particularly after dark? There's a few personal security issues there. It's in quite a quiet corner. I mean, it's really only the user that could tell you that. This one here is another example. You have to be a user to work it out, but in fact, it's not on any. It was well-meaning, but it's just a standard 13-amp plug socket. It's not on any website. It has no indication outside of the car park what it is or that it's available. And it's also switched off at 6 o'clock at night to discourage camper vans. So, and that's been like that for 2 years. So, anyway, so we think that we need more of, this sounds rather anecdotal, but these things mount up. Hands up now. This is a physical hands up, please, now. How many of you have ever in your life seen a charging point? Yeah, that's what we kind of expect. Okay, now, a recent UK survey. This is the good news. This was a survey, 1,200 drivers. This is the mainstream markets. Now, the good news was that over 40% of people say they would consider acquiring an EV in the next 5 years. That's good news. However, what put them off? They were put off by the price as yet, but 50% were also put off because they had no idea where to plug it in. And they also had, about 50%, slightly more, had no idea who they'd go to for advice other than the dealer. So, and 60% thought that EVs were an impractical choice because of the insufficient number of charge points. And over 70% had never ever seen a charging point in their life. So that's after spending over 30 million euros on it. So the Commissioner may be right. It seems that a number of factors which compromise the visibility and utility of charge points, we can start to look at things a little bit more critically. It may be something quite simple. It may be inadequate signing and lining. It may be poor website information. Sometimes they're in the place not located on the website. And sometimes it's the incompatibility of adjacent land uses and personal security issues. These are clearly not kind of rocket science issues. With our e-mobility partners, we're bringing together decision makers and the people actually doing the implementing, the siting the car parks, to work out how we can get this right at micro level, having taken into account all the constraints. So we're just trying to put together the information to see what the pattern is, which ones are, we've now got the empirical data of usage, and let's see if we can work out how to get it better. So conclusions. Despite the somewhat sparse provision of charging points in the UK until quite recently, the early adopter market have embraced electric driving with relative ease and with some enthusiasm. The bigger challenge remains how to convince the more cautious, sometimes skeptical, early majority of mainstream users. So in marketing terms, we're trying to push this through from the introductory phase into the growth phase. Unless we do it, none of the desired objectives of electric driving will be achieved, environmental or economic. So that's something at very micro level might have quite big implications. The Royal Academy of Engineering in the UK observed, creating a pervasive network of charging points will be a major but necessary investment if EVs are to achieve acceptability in mainstream markets. It isn't easy to install infrastructure ahead of demand, and again, perhaps with the wisdom of hindsight, we might not have done it that way. But we need to ensure it's fit for purpose from the user's point of view. Unless we get it right, the credibility of electric driving may be compromised and seriously undermined, not only to potential converts, but also, very importantly, I think, for national and local politicians who are key stakeholders in the project. Thank you very much.